Welcome to the Advisor Insights interviews. My name is Louise Brockman. I'm the founder and CEO of the Advisory Board Centre, and I'm here with Paul Davies, who's a certified chair and enjoying the Advisory Board journey. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to hearing about your most recent experiences. But before we do that, Paul, and diving into that, if you'd like to share a bit about your background, that'd be a great start.
Okay, well, my executive background is very much in financial services and investments. So having been a institutional stockbroker and then a business development manager for global investment managers. 12 years ago, I graduated from the company directors course and have since got a lot of board experience with non-for-profits in particular. And then about 3 years ago, I joined the Advisory Board Centre, became an advisor, and a year later did the chairs course. And since then, I've worked on a couple of boards, advisory boards, one of which I am chair of. Yes, it's been an interesting experience.
Yeah, terrific. So I'd like to dig into that experience where you're chairing, and it's in the construction industry, Paul. So really like to hear about what that journey has been like and the processes that you've implemented for your best practice advisory board.
Yes. So I mean, the company is based in another state and it wants to break into South Australia. So our initial discussions were about a project-based board to fulfill this goal. They're a well-established company and they would have a turnover, at the higher end of the sort of average SME turnover. My approach was that I know nothing about construction, but I do know about running boards. I've had a lot of experience, and certainly having done the certified chair course, that really refocuses your attention on what you need to do to chair an advisory board as opposed to a governance board, because they're two very different objectives there. And what I did with the company was initially do the board starter program, and over 2 months we did the first two parts of the program, which meant evaluating their business growth score, and also doing the value chain checklist. And really what it confirmed was that, yep, SA expansion is definitely needed to grow the company. They need a board to actually achieve this. And then it confirmed the ideal criteria for these board members to be fit for purpose for this particular board. And I think it's very important that people do go through this process with companies, even if they've got what they think is a very defined set of goals already, because if you confirm those with the companies through a process, I think that gives them a lot more confidence in the decision making going forward. And when times when maybe you get glitches, maybe the company's pressed for time, they realize that they've got to continue with this process if they really are going to achieve what they want. So yeah, I think the process of that is very important. We found that once we had worked out what we want from each board member, it made the hiring process a lot easier. We were able to create a position description, and from that a position advertisement. And I found over time, when I've been hiring people, but also applying for positions myself, you sometimes get this terrible long wish list of things you want from a particular applicant. And really all we did was we actually laid out what this board is trying to achieve. We were really looking for someone who could just achieve that. The only criteria we put down was 20 years plus of experience in construction companies, but looking to achieve what we're trying to do there: strategic advice on expanding in South Australia, providing a network of contacts, and also maybe introducing clients, plus maybe people who could actually be applicants for state manager. So that's really what we laid that out in the position description. And as a result, we were actually able to get a fairly good field of candidates.
It's a very specific role description, Paul. So sometimes advisory boards are really quite generic, and then other times they're really quite specific. So as a project advisory board, that's the way that you established that it had a very specific function.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And as a result, we've got a couple of very good board members, who have a lot of experience, and I think they've added a lot of value. In terms of once you've hired people, I find that a board induction chat with each member is very important. These two particular members are quite experienced, so they've either been on boards or they've reported to boards, and I think it gives them a chance to see the whites of my eyes as chair as well, because I can explain my background, but also just to clarify expectations from both sides as to how a board or this particular board will run, and that gives, I think, me confidence as well as the other board members as well. Because I found, whether it's an advisory board or governance board, it's often behaviours which determine whether that board is going to be adding value or not, and sometimes you can get some fairly poor behaviours, and we won't go there.
But Paul, you raised a raised a really important point about the orientation before the advisory board really starts, so that you remove any of those personal biases, but also assumptions about what the advisory board is there to do and not to do.
Yes, quite right. Yeah, that's right. And then, of course, it's very important, I think, as we've been taught in the certified chairs course, to also have the right documents as well, but behind a board. So that means a good charter, confidentiality agreement, again, which I think shows professionalism, and also your agendas and minutes, which are very good to create focus for everyone, but also in case the regulators come knocking and you want to show that you've actually been an advisory board, not a governance board. And I think that's important, because also your professional indemnity insurance as well is very different, and what you get covered for by your insurer if something goes wrong. It's important for those insurers as well to see that you've been acting appropriately, and you'll find that the premiums are very different. If you're on a governance board, the premiums are significantly higher than an advisory board. Because you're not there giving, you don't have a fiduciary responsibility.
Yes, and Paul, it's interesting that you've been both on governance boards and advisory boards. And can I just ask, had the organisation had an advisory board before, or is this the first time they've actually ventured down this path? Right.
This is the first time, yeah.
And then the whole establishment process, how important was it for them to really be educated through that process on what the advisory board was in comparison to their governance board?
Well, they don't even have a governance board. I mean, they have two directors. That's it. So I wouldn't call that a board. But yes, they needed to be educated as to what we're trying to achieve, the focus that we're using, and also the parameters of the board and where we're not going to step into, but what we are going to focus on. And I think that's given them a lot of confidence. In having gone through the process, they got confidence in the decision making.
That's terrific. Well, I look forward to hearing more about the journey, Paul, as it continues on over time. Sounds like a very targeted advisory board, so I'm sure you're really going for some really targeted impacts.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, and look forward to continuing the journey with you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Bye for now.